The imagination that got us into this planetary mess will not and cannot be the one to get us out of it. And thus, we have an obligation to wrap our arms around those with a different imagination. Of course, I'm talking about Indigenous peoples, in particular, the Indigenous communities throughout Oceania that I work so closely with, that I have sort of walked arm in arm with for the last 15 years in private practice, trying to use the law, however limited it is, to get some measure of justice for their communities.
Aloha mai kako. Aloha. It really is a great privilege and honor to be here, to open up this space, to especially mahalo Julian for all the light and the beauty that he brings to our world, and also to offer this mele as a means to ho'omana our aina and Maui komohana in particular, to remind us of the beauty and the power of words, of our mele, and the aina for which I think we all fight so hard. He aloha la, he aloha la, aloha e na Hawaii, mai Hawaii nui o ke ave lai, ai ke o ne e o ni I hau. E ia ho'i o Maui lai, pui ai ke alalo ke lani. A he lani nui o Lahaina lai, ka hela I hoi ka halawai. Vai mau ia I ka ui ke la, I ka wai ka uli o ke uho. Kuno o malaika ma'ala, nana pu'uno ai a ke awai ki. Ai ki a puai wai ne'elai, I ka hele o na kini I moku ulai. Puana ia me ke aloha pau o lelai. Uana ni o lele. Wakaula e. Aloha.
Aloha. Mahalo nui ui. Oh, yeah. Nani loa. Mahalo. And nui ke aloha. So aloha. I'm Brandy Nālani McDougall, and I'm joined by the amazing National Poetry Series Award winner, No'u Revilla. Just wanted to say that. For the amazing book, Ask the Brindle. Anyway, yeah, read it if you haven't. It's amazing. And we collaborated to write a poem along with the also amazing Dana Naone Hall, the American Book Award winner for her work, Life of the Land, which chronicles her poetry, as well as her life devoted to activism and protecting aina, including the aina on Maui. Yeah. So this poem is for Kamalu'ulu Olele. After we share this poem, which is called Aya Ihea Kawai o Lahaina, or Where is the Water of Lahaina, I'm also going to sing a mele that my dad, Jeffrey McDougall, wrote when he was a young Hawaiian away from Maui for a little while and longing for home. And that's kind of, like how we are right now. Yeah. So, we share this poem with all of you with all of our aloha aina for Maui, and in particular for Maui Komohana. Yeah. He ui, he ni nau, e ui aku ana au ia oi.
Ai hea kawai o Lahaina.
Where high bent forests and fog, where cloud cover, where rain, where full stream flow freed.
Ai hea kawai o Lahaina.
Not in the dry kahawai where the waters should run to flow over all the roads that were blocked and detoured to Po.
Ai hea kawai o Lahaina.
Not above where dark clouds should be black with vai and emptying to white until white means empty, waiting to be filled.
Ai hea kawai o Lahaina.
Some remains in the thin veins of Kanaha, Kahoma, Halona, and Kauaula. Barely in the warm breath of Kilihau, Pohakea, or Imihau, in the dry wheezes of Hulialopali, Waiuli, or Vehelaunu. Some in Naua Kilihau me Kapa'upili, if they come. No longer in Mokuhinia. No longer a lei for Moku'ula.
Drought is an old war. Ai hea kawai o Lahaina.
Wind ruffles the surface of the ocean. The tide is low. The bare reef exposed. In the distance, how sharp the peaks of the western mountains, as Lele and Lahaina became Lahaina.
They planned our thirst for centuries. E o e nā kupa o Lahaina.
We uwe with you, aloha with you.
Kaumaha, claws inside us for the dead, forced to bury themselves, for the missing, for the swaths of black and benzene that bled into the vai, for everyone bleeding ash, we ue for generations.
And look, you are Lahaina Ohana, still here.
Watch us light propane stoves and cook venison on hibachi. Watch us clean and share fish from our lavaia, kalo from our mahi'ai, everything sweet and green from the mala, from kumula'au, still standing elsewhere. Thousands and thousands of scoops of rice. Watch us feed each other.
Watch us make our own supply routes from flatbed trucks, jet skis, and boats, for cots, diva cups, tents, tarps, gas cans, headlamps, walkie-talkies, blankets, diapers, and generators. That's right, diapers. And bottles and jugs and barrels of vai.
Watch our medics practice consent, slow and mahalo. Watch our constellation of Venmos and GoFundMes shine. Watch every kupuna, every keiki treasured, every ohana taken in long after the Airbnb vouchers expire. Watch us protect our water. Watch us make our own pu'uhonua. Watch us teach them how.
Aia I hea kawai o Lahaina.
As we pule, ue and rage, pule, ue and rage, vai flows and weaves memory and dream. Our vaimaka feed the soil and sing the rains of Maui awake. We are not cornered animals. We will grieve We will grieve, and we will grieve.
And Pi'i kahuhu.
And we will still be gentle with each other.
The ma'a breeze is steady.
We will teach them how again and again.
We can't say enough to speak back the nahele of Kula, the noi, the au hiva hiva, the puna, to gently draw vai down these grassy slopes.
We can't speak back the lo'i, the ulu, the uala, the kumula'au, the lives, the lands and waters lost.
But we can keep asking. Aya ihea kawai o Lahaina. Aya ihea kawai o Kula. Aya ihea kawai o Maui. Aya ihea kawai o Kapai Aina o Hawaii. We can tell our keiki, we protect each other and all we aloha.
Tell them we stayed so we can bring the water back.
We can billow steam until it rises so thick, its malu, its kilihune, cools and cleans all of this aina aloha.
Until the vai, until the vai, until the vai.
And hu ke ola. Lahaina, he aina momona.
Lahaina he aina, i aloha nui ia.
E ola, lahaina.
E ola i ka vai.
There were rainbows in her valley on the night the sun was born. Not a teardrop did I shed. How I long to go back home. Oh, where have you gone? My island Maui, I have left you. Now I miss you so. Your valleys and your hillsides and your oceans roar, I know. We'll return, my island Maui. We go walking on her beaches as the sun goes slowly down. Yes, we owe our lives to Maui for the peace that we have found. Oh, where have you gone? My island Maui, we'll return. Yes, we will return. My island Maui. Mahalo, aloha.
Aloha, aloha mai kākou. Whew, I think that was Julian's real introduction, actually. Aia ihea kawai o Maui. A question we all ask. And Eola, Maui kumahana. This evening, it is my great privilege and honor to introduce my dear friend, my brother, my personal hero, Julian Aguon. Julian is an Indigenous human rights lawyer and writer from Guam. He is the founder of Blue Ocean Law, an innovative litigation firm that takes a holistic and human rights-based approach to the practice of law. At Blue Ocean, they embrace a grassroots orientation that privileges civil society and marginalized voices. Julian is deeply engaged in the struggles of people across Mauna Nui Kea, our great Pacific Ocean, to liberate ourselves from colonial rule, defend sacred sites, and secure justice for the range of harms inflicted by outside forces, from nuclear weapons testing and non-consensual medical experiments to extractive industries and climate change. In other words, Julian is a Richardson lawyer. As a graduate of the University of Hawaii at Mānoa's William S. Richardson School of Law, he is precisely the kind of advocate and human being that our founder, Chief Justice William S. Richardson, envisioned. Julian is a change agent who steps forward when others are pulling back. Julian is also an accomplished essayist, a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, and the author of this widely praised, lyrical, and lovely book, No Country for 8-Spot Butterflies. We'll ask for a hana hou. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Julian Aguon.
Wow. This is an incredible honor to be here. Can you all hear me? Yeah. I'm totally undone by the women that have been up here and the art and the beauty and the testimony that we've already heard. I mean, it's truly like a singular thing to be in the presence of those who really command language. It's truly powerful in a way that undoes me every time, and it has again. I'm honored to be here. Thank you all. Thank you all for your time. Thanks for sharing this beautiful evening with us. It is a beautiful evening. I want to thank everyone here, the sponsors as well, for bringing us here. All of the poets that have spoken already. I think poets and poetry, poetry is leading us. I think that is incredibly true. So yes, as Kapua mentioned, I am a Richardson graduate. It's amazing to be back on this campus to God, what is it, 15 years? 15 years later. But I've really sort of been busy. I really have been trying to operationalize the best of the insights that I sort of picked up in this place. I'm trying to sort of be the lawyer in the world that I sort of looked around and emulated. Some of the amazing people, like my dear friend Kapua, she's battling all the time, like every second of the day, it seems. But yeah, we are trying to do the most important thing one can do with the law, which is to use it, to wield it, to deploy it in service of the most vulnerable communities. So yes, I am also a writer, so I've also been busy trying to sort of intervene at various moments in time that felt particularly pregnant, either with trauma or with possibility. I tried to be really, really deliberate about those interventions because time is so precious, and I feel more and more like I have less and less of it. So I try really hard to write when I feel like I cannot not do it, like it is my duty, it's my responsibility to do it. And so I'm going to actually be reading a lot throughout the night. I hope that is okay with you. I'm a writer, so maybe what I've written might be better than what I say here. But I want to start with something that Rebecca Solnit once said recently, I think earlier this year at the Bioneers Conference. She said, "The climate crisis requires so many things of us, so many, many things, including so many practical things. But it's also about the stories we tell, or the stories we are not telling. Stories are incredibly powerful. They can open doors wide, or they can slam them shut. We can tell stories where we're fragile and brittle, and where we simply cannot meet the needs of our loved ones, where we cannot rise to the occasion. Or we can tell stories where we're incredibly powerful, and we're here to meet the needs of others and to meet the needs of the earth itself." I agree with her. I also was fortunate enough to meet with her. We had a book event last year. This time last year, I'm not sure if you all know, but this exact time last year, No Country for AIDS But Butterflies was released into the world. And one of my conversation partners at the San Francisco bookstore was Rebecca Solnit, and we talked and talked and talked. But one of the things we've latched onto is like one of the great failures of the left is that we've really, so many of us anyway, have neglected the role of narrative in the project of bringing about political change, and we've paid dearly for that. One of the reasons we're so stuck at the moment is because we haven't developed a new narrative to get us unstuck. For climate change in particular, part of the problem is that it's not just about the stories we're telling, but how we're telling them. It's all so big. It's all so loud. It's all so much like screaming. We can't hear each other anymore. We can hardly hear ourselves think. My talk tonight, including the pieces that I'm going to read, are a humble attempt to quiet down that noise. And with that, we'll see if I have the talent to work this slideshow. The great writer Arundhati Roy once said, quote, "Writers imagine that they cull stories from the world. I'm beginning to believe that vanity makes them think so. That it's actually the other way around. Stories cull writers from the world. Stories reveal themselves to us. The public narrative, the private narrative, they colonize us. They commission us. They insist on being told. Truer words were never written. At least this has proven true in my own experience. And the moment I knew it did is when I heard one story about one old man from a small coastal village in Fiji. Faced with the prospect of climate-induced relocation, some leaders have contemplated buying land in other countries in anticipation of having to move some or all of their people. One leader has already sealed a deal. In 2014, the then president of Kiribati, Anotitong, entered into a purchase agreement with the Anglican Church for more than 5,000 acres in Fiji, paying nearly $9 million for them. Though the deal was seen as visionary by some, to others it marked a kind of death. After all, at what point does an agreement that envisions the relocation of an entire human population, now some 121,000 people, become more eulogy than contract? In Fiji, the government keeps its own kind of death list, an official record of all the villages that may have to be relocated because of sea level rise. Using internal climate vulnerability assessments, the Fijian government has determined which of its coastal villages are most susceptible to coastal erosion, flooding, and saltwater intrusion. As of 2017, 42 villages were on the list. If and when they are forced to move, they won't be the first. In 2014, Vuni Dongaloa formally relocated to higher ground, some 2 kilometers inland. When I spoke with Sailosi Ramatu, that village's headman in July, he told me that the move was hardest on the elders. In the months leading up to the relocation, they held prayer circles. They fasted. They readied themselves for the rupture of having to abandon their ancestral lands. In Fiji, as in many of our islands, the people are tethered to the earth, as enshrined in the concept of Vanua, a word that means the land and the people at once. Vuni Dongaloans live and love and die on their lands, most of which they do not even own, at least not as individuals. Rather, theirs is a system of communal land ownership. They tend to their gardens. They bury their dead. They even bury their umbilical cords. So, it was no surprise when, as about 30 families set out for the new site, some of the older women wailed as they walked. Perhaps that's a sound the sea makes when it rises. Old women wailing. Not everyone made the journey. The dead remain interned in a cemetery at the old site. According to Ramatu, one of the biggest struggles his people faced was leaving their buried loved ones behind. Some worry they'll be cursed for abandoning their deceased relatives. Others walk around with holes in their heart, like the old man who visits the cemetery nearly every day to sit by the grave of his dead wife. I'm not sure which flowers he brings her, if any, but I imagine they're beautiful. Perhaps the story of climate change is a story of flowers. Can I take this off? Thank you. So clearly this story commissioned me. It insisted on being told, you know. I've had this climate change essay sort of rolling around in my mind for honest to God 10 years. And I just couldn't. It's too big, right? It's all too big, it's too much, it's climate change. You know, we have such a terrible, logistical time trying to take all of that scale, that enormity, and bring it down, bring it down, bring it down, and bring it down again. You know, but we need to do that. We need to have a conversation about climate change that's astonishingly different. A conversation that has what I feel, anyway, what I feel has been missing, and that is intimacy. When I heard this story, I just completely failed. I was like, this is a story that we need to tell. We need a writer and writers to tell these stories because they're granular. We brought them all the way down to earth and we realized, wow, this is what it looks like. This is loss and damage. This is the kind of adverse impact of climate change that we are having a terrible time talking about because we just are up here somewhere. We're up here. And when I heard this story about this one old man in this village, I realized if we can do that, if we can come all the way down, you know, I feel like in some ways we're looking so high for the answer, but maybe we need to look low. You know, we need to forsake the horizon for the hue, for the color, for the texture. We need to be human in this process, and we need our artists to remind us of that. And that is really sort of the intervention. Like once I heard this story, I finally realized, okay, now it's time. I have to sit down. I was about to say my ass down. I also have a foul mouth. But I have to sit and hold this and tell this story because this is a story that has intimacy. This is a story that's capable of trying to recalibrate the energy of the conversation that we are having, or more rightly, not having about climate change. Where is that bloody thing here? Wait, before I go, this is the village. This is Vuni Dongaloa. This is it. So the village they moved to, this whole community, roughly 30 families, moved just a little inland and to higher ground. this is the essay that I ended up writing, the one I just talked about. I did it for a number of reasons in terms of the timing, but once it was finished, I worked with The Atlantic. They were a team of great editors, although I've never been, I don't know, exposed to that level. This was my first attempt to publish in a mainstream journal. And I was like, wow, 9 rounds of edits? This is kind of crazy. I was like, this is like law school. This is like Kapua's class, or Linda Krieger's class. I mean, this is really intense, I was like, wow. But I love it. They were so meticulous and ridiculously merciless, with their editing. But I love that because it's the same sort of enterprise. Lawyers, writers, we're all in this enterprise together. And that is to become really, really precise about the language we're using, right? We want to wield our words. We want to brandish them. That is what good writing at least attempts to do. And with this essay in particular, one of the reasons that I found the timing so important. So the team of editors worked really closely with me to get it published on November 1st. That was important because it coincided with the opening week of COP. Yet another year, yet another COP. And we needed, a shot in the arm. We needed some freaking adrenaline. Because before that, so many of the Pacific Island delegations, they're just so battered by this sort of process, into which they pour so much of their political energy, and I would argue oftentimes get too little out of that process, And what I wanted to do, especially with the title, was try to breathe new life into the slogan, the mantra, the war cry of the Pacific Climate Warriors. Do you all know what that is, that mantra? We're not drowning, we're fighting. So I tried to just reinterpret it when I titled this essay, and honestly, the best part about it was not the nomination for the Pulitzer, it was really all of the clandestine messages that I received from climate activists across Oceania saying, yes, thank you, yes, this is exactly what we needed. We needed a shot in the arm. But another reason why this essay is so important and why I'm reading from it twice, 2 different sections, is because it helped me operationalize a belief that I have, a conviction, if you will, that the imagination that got us into this planetary mess will not and cannot be the one to get us out of it. And thus, we have an obligation to wrap our arms around those with a different imagination. Of course, I'm talking about Indigenous peoples, in particular, the Indigenous communities throughout Oceania that I work so closely with, that I have sort of walked arm in arm with for the last 15 years in private practice, trying to use the law, however limited it is, to get some measure of justice for their communities. But yeah, I think that's enough about that essay. Moving on, because I'm also going to read a lot to you, so hopefully also the timing is going to work out. Vuni Dongaloa was the first, but it's absolutely not the last. This document, inelegantly titled Standard Operating Procedures for Planned Relocation in the Republic of Fiji, it is deeply depressing. I could hardly finish it, just go through it. I'm sure you will all agree. It's hard, it is the most thorough plan ever devised by any country ever to tackle the possibility, this one particular aspect of the climate crisis that we don't like to talk about much is forced relocation. So it was very, very hard to get through. But why I bring this up is because the story I just told, yes, it's a story about something that's happened, but it's also a foreshadowing. We already know that more villages are being contemplated to be added to the list. The government itself calls this planning document a living document. They do, and do you know why they call it a living document? Because they keep adding to it. There are too many other coastal villages in this country that are susceptible to the adverse impacts of climate change, so it's a living document. Of course, I hate to agree with the government, and I have worked a little with Fijian communities, but it pains me to say, but I disagree. I think this is absolutely not a living document, It's a death list, and that's how I categorize it, because that's how I feel, because I work with communities on the ground, and so many of them absolutely have no intention nor desire to move. I see that most recently, I just heard of a wide range of sort of players, global like third-party actors, international financial institutions that are advising on contract, they're consulting various Pacific Island governments, including low-lying atolls governments, and it's so almost impossible to talk about. Because we know, for example, in the Marshall Islands, that so many studies have been done, and I mean on-the-ground interviews, including some done by Joe Jigum, like actual youth groups, Marshallese youth groups, who've gone around and talked to their own communities. And we know for a fact that the Marshallese people absolutely have no interest. They are not interested in relocation. They are not interested in purely symbolic culture. They have a culture. They have a language, and it's an ecologically derived culture and language. It took root in this particular place. It is an ethos, it is a worldview, and it's on the line, And they have no interest in being moved, but certain institutions, including multiple consultants, are constantly bringing it up, trying to include it in lists of acceptable adaptation options. Oh, it's really, it's painful. It's quite something. This is a slide of a submerged graveyard in Togoru, yet another Fijian village. I want to share it for one reason. Togoru is not on the list of 42. They said, hell no. They were like, even if they meet all of the criteria, all the elements are satisfied, right? And they were like, I'm sorry, no. It's an emphatic no. It's a declaration of war no. It is an unequivocal no. So they're not on the list, even if this is happening. And this is something that is continuing to happen. Oh, before I do, I want to read a little poem from my book, No Country. And of course, if I was smart, I would have dog-eared this. Oh my God, please just bear with me. Oh Lord Kapua, I'm so unprepared. Hold on, let me try to find this. Where is it? Oh, right here, 54, wow. You are very overqualified, I'm very sorry. You are amazing. Okay, can you all still hear me? Thank you, Kapua. Sorry about that. This is a poem I wrote after actually overhearing an argument with a European climate scientist, sort of attacking a young Pacific climate warrior about the science behind 1.5 versus 2. And it was ridiculous to even, so of course I intervened, and I spoke up for this young person, but this young person was, from the Pacific, from a frontline community, and just struggling at the moment to find the language that she needed, to, graft her will on the world. And I wrote this for her. We have no need for scientists to tell us things we already know. Like the sea is rising and the water is getting warm. The inundated need no instruction in inundation. We have eyes of our own. And besides, we are busy scraping barnacles off of our grandfathers' graves and other headstones drowned at high tide. We know how critical it is our coral reefs stay healthy and our mangrove forests dense. We will defend them to the end, not because some study shows they provide protection from erosion or shelter from storms, but because our reefs are adoring aunts feeding other people's children, and our mangroves, mothers in their own right. Thank you. Sometimes the work of writing is mostly about writing. Sometimes it's mostly about holding other people, holding stories, and holding space. And also, sometimes the most persuasive way to get one's message across is to simply inject yourself into the story. So I'm reading one last excerpt from To Hell with Drowning. And I decided this was a huge thing for me because I debated about whether I needed to be in the essay. I really did. I struggled with it. I thought, no. Distance. Keep myself out. And I realized, no, if I don't do this, the essay will suffer greatly. So this is the section about me in the essay that I just shared with you. On my island, climate change is a story of storms. Guam, the largest and southernmost of the Mariana Islands and an unincorporated territory of the US, lies within one of the most active regions for tropical cyclones in the world. The typhoons that have historically battered the island are so strong, they're often called super typhoons. Everyone here remembers their first. Mine was Omar in August 1992. We were unprepared. My mother, brother, sister, and me. This was in part because my father, who typically did the preparatory work of putting up shutters and removing debris from around the house, had recently died. I remember the four of us huddled behind a cream-colored mattress. I remember tracing its embroidered flowers with my finger. I remember everything, really. Trees and telephone poles cracked in half. The roof of our neighbor's house went flying, as did his canopy and one of his cars. I remember glass everywhere, several windows and a sliding door shattered. I remember the sound of the wind as it blew under the bottom of my bedroom door, like an old man sucking his teeth. Pamela is the one my mom remembers, May 1976. One of the most intense storms to strike Guam last century, Pamela generated 8-meter waves and ravaged the beaches on both the northern and southeastern sides of the island. She sank 10 ships in the local harbor. She did an estimated $500 million worth of damage. But none of this is what my mom remembers. What she remembers, what she will never forget, is a single white toilet, American standard, the one thing left of her house when Pamela was over. Then there was Paka, December 1997. The wind and rain beat down on us for 12 hours. Their barometric pressure was so low it induced labor in 9 pregnant women. Paka, like Russ in 1990 and Yuri in 1991, unearthed untold numbers of dead bodies when it slammed into the southern cemeteries of Jotnya and Inarahan. Corpses spilled out of their coffins. Coffins bobbed like buoys in the bay. Several families spent weeks combing the beaches in search of their beloved ones. Some were never found. My aunt, who worked for one of the cemeteries, said that one family was able to identify their father's body only because of a cherished baseball cap, which they had buried him in and which had stuck to his skull by way of a mess of seaweed. Suffice it to say, when the IPCC dropped its latest report, confirming that tropical cyclones are just going to get stronger, my corner of the world shuddered. So, yes, that was difficult to write, but actually, I've been sort of on this journey, it's like once I got on the journey, I couldn't get off, So I've been actually doing a way deeper dive. For example, my father, I wrote about him a little bit in that essay, but I had never really seriously sat down to write about him. It's like the climate change essay. Apparently, it takes me a very long time to write. I'm not very prolific. I think deeply for a very long time, apparently, before I'm able to do any writing. But yeah, this book that I'm about to share with you, one passage from, No Country for AIDS About Butterflies, this book is about grief. You know, I wrote it during the height of the pandemic. We were suffering from so many things at once, not just alarmingly high rates of COVID, but a rash of suicides, particularly among young people in Guam. Just young people losing hope, you know, not being able to find it, not being able to talk to their loved ones. It was so bad, I think it was like 1 every 6 days for a minute. Yeah, and I realized that I too, as a young person, sort of having lost my father, you know, watching my nuclear family fall spectacularly to pieces, I also knew what it meant to lack access to the language that I needed to set me free. I knew what that was like. I've held that feeling for a very long time, but I have never written about it until this book, until an essay called Zugu Means Yoke. Arguably the most important kind of personal, vulnerable essay I've ever written in my life. And I wrote it in the book, and I will read it for you now. No, I'm good. I know, for real, this is so beneath. Okay. Zugu means yoke. The last thing I said to my father when he was still alive was how much I hated him for having cancer. And I hated him hardest the night before he died. It was Halloween. I was a teenage mutant ninja turtle, Donatello, and all I wanted in the world was to get as far away from that hospital as I could. The hospital that smelled like spite and served as second home to my siblings and me in the months leading up to his death. I threw an epic fit after being told my chances of going trick-or-treating weren't good. I fretted as the hours rolled by, convinced there'd be no candy left by the time I got there. I let every adult in my dad's hospital room, including my dad, know how much I hated being there, hated cancer, hated him. I nagged my poor mother so hard she finally relented and told my oldest brother and his wife, who had just flown in from the States, to take my sister and me to the mall. I knew the candy there wouldn't be half as good as the candy on the houses in Nimitz Hill, but I was dying to get out of there, dying to breathe some other air, dying to have just a little bit of fun. But of course, it was my dad who was dying. Unbeknownst to me, he had been rapidly declining all that day and was, according to the doctors, decidedly on his way out of the world. Of course, I understood none of this then. At 9, one cannot read the signs, cannot see the harried pacing of nurses for what it is, cannot see the emptiness in a soon-to-be widow's eyes. After we buried him, we moved permanently into the house on the hill, the blue and white house on the highest hill in Mount Santa Rosa, the house where everything rusted from the salt water winds that blew in with a vengeance from the Philippine Sea. The house that was never a home. I hated that house. So did my sister. I suspect my brother did too, though he never said so. It's hard to tell because we barely spoke at the time, at least not about anything that mattered. In fact, I mostly avoided him. In fact, we mostly avoided each other. Each of us mourned in our own way, my mom by crying, my sister by self-isolating, my brother by leaving, and me by eating. Believe it or not, though, that wasn't even the problem. The problem, as I see it now, was that each of us mourned alone, as opposed to together. I see us so clearly. Each of us an island, all of us at sea. We didn't stand a chance. Luckily, we each found something to get us through those deeply lonely years. My mom found she could disappear into her work. My brother found a girlfriend. My sister found Janet Jackson and a bunch of our dad's old shirts, which she wore religiously because she smelled him in them. And I found a whole wide world on that red dirt mountain. The first thing I found was a family of tree snails, which I'd spend hours watching, wondering why they moved so slowly, wondering if they could, if they had to, move swiftly enough to save their own lives. I found so many things after that. I found I could slide down the smaller slopes at the back of my house if I had just the right piece of cardboard. I found out the hard way that before one runs through an open field of swordgrass, one should wear a long-sleeved shirt. I found no need for a bike. I found butterflies in abundance. I found more grasshoppers than I could count. I studied them closely. That is, when they let me get close. I was awed by how far their little legs could take them. I couldn't for the life of me fathom how such small legs could support such big hops. I wondered endlessly about wings. I was envious of everything that could fly. I prayed without knowing how to for wings of my own. I wasn't the only one. Further down the dirt road, my friend hanged himself in his house. The house closest to the bus stop where we took the bus to school every day, the house where words were shouted, not spoken, the house that was never a home. I learned so many things after that. I learned that same friend was an artist, that he loved to draw, that he drew a picture of a friend just before he died, that he tucked it away in a box beneath his bed, that he was capable of gentleness. I did not exactly know that because my friend was also sometimes my bully. But that's the other thing I learned. I learned that when we are in pain, we inflict pain. That when we feel we can no longer breathe, we grab other people's air. I also learned this. Jigo, the village that we lived in, comes from the Chamorro word zugu. Zugu means yoke, as in to bear a heaviness or to carry a burden. We all bore that heaviness. My sister most of all. I know this because once, when I was 10 and she 11, I found her outside in the middle of the night wearing nothing but my dad's old shirt, which she had washed one too many times, and which she said no longer smelled like him. Though it had been only 1 year since he died, I was beginning to be able to read the signs. I could see the emptiness in her eyes. I changed my prayer right then and there. I prayed for her wings, not mine. Apart from that being sort of the most personal essay I've ever written, I also want to share it because there's something I didn't include in the essay, arguably the most important fact, and that is the reason why my father contracted cancer in the first place. He fitted pipes down at Apple Harbor, at the U.S. Navy ship repair facility, the same exact harbor where just after the U.S. detonated several nuclear weapons in the Marshall Islands, which is 1,200 miles from Guam, no less than 18 irradiated vessels, for example, the vessels that flew through the radioactive plumes to measure the radiation exposure in the Marshall Islands, were then flown to Guam, and they were fleshed out by people like my father. And I know this, I believe this to be true. I have no data, but I do because all of my friends, my closest friends, whose parents also worked at the U.S. Navy's SRF ship repair facility, have also died of cancer. So the personal is political, and this came roaring to a head when I was writing this essay, and I chose to hold back some of those things in the writing. I do it in the essays on climate change, and I do it in the book because I say a lot of those things, and I make a lot of those connections. But sometimes I feel like, no. Sometimes I hold back on purpose because I feel like so much of the writing on these topics, it is important to be very clear. It's important to name the perpetrator. It is important to bring to bear all of your moral outrage. All of that is important, and I do that all the time as a lawyer, as a litigator in particular. But as a writer, if the use of language feels qualitatively different to me, I think Arundhati would put it this way. When you're using language as a lawyer, you have a mission, and that is to cultivate the cold precision of an assassin's bullet. That is your job. But as a writer, It's very different. You are writing, you're trying to cultivate the language that you need. So the purpose is different, and you're trying to build a fire, and you're trying to warm up as many bodies as possible. It's deeply loving, it's radically so. And that's why both of those projects are mine to do. This is my work to do, but they're very, very different from each other. But I wanted to share that story. But I also want to mention one thing, but maybe I will hold that till the next slide. How am I doing on time? Good? Really good, right? Okay, thanks. I have some law to get to. This is the book. We'll skip. These are my partners, Margaretha Weber, Rinke Singh, and Flora Ramsey. They are awesome. They work with me full-time at Blue Ocean Law. We are working on a number of issues. Blue Ocean Law is a Guam-based international law firm, but we work across the Pacific region. We work on a wide range of issues, and we are proud to say we are a Micronesian-led law firm. We... For the last 15 years, we've taken on a number of adversaries. We have sued the U.S. military multiple times. We have sued various U.S. federal agencies. We represent individuals, nonprofits, civil society organizations. We are trying to operationalize our belief that Indigenous peoples have part of the answer to the question about how to get out of the mess that we're in. And we try to operationalize that point of view in every sort of thing that we do. That's what motivates our client selection, And we say no to a lot of clients because we are a small team. Because intimacy matters to us. We are trying to put that into practice in everything we do. We turn down, honestly, 90% of the work we get offered because we're trying to do something different. We're trying to, and what we all share is I share with Kapua right here. We have a very different relationship with power. And it's an adversarial one. We understand that the law, while very limited, is also on occasion a very effective tool to effectuate certain kinds of change or to arrest the spread of certain types of things, like the spreading canopy of U.S. militarization, which is directly impacting my community. But yes, we've worked on the right to self-determination. We have worked to try to defend that right in the case of the native inhabitants of Guam. We have worked on land tenure protections in the CNMI. We have worked with Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, on non-consensual medical experimentation, on the ongoing legacy of nuclear weapons testing. But lately, we have focused almost exclusively on climate justice. This is not my team. But this is a team of awesome law students on the Vanuatu campus of the University of the South Pacific. I'm very proud to say that our law firm, our little law firm, is lead counsel to the Republic of Vanuatu, which at this moment is pursuing an advisory opinion on climate change and human rights from the International Court of Justice. You don't need to clap, the ICJ is the principal judicial organ of the UN and the only one to yet pronounce on the climate crisis. So we are bringing the climate crisis to the world's highest court. And we're working with lots and lots of partners, not just the Republic of Vanuatu, not just the government, but also this amazing sort of kaleidoscope of passionate, intelligent youth that have since formed the organization Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change. And they have been at the forefront of this movement. They have been at the forefront of this movement, as have we, as the legal team. Honestly, and I believe, though, before I say that, I believe that we were engaged for a very particular reason. Because when we were first approached by members of the Vanuatu government, it really was by Minister Regan Vanu, at least the first person we spoke to. He's a longtime climate justice advocate. He knew he needed a law firm that would fight tooth and nail to protect the integrity of the legal question being asked of the World Court. Because there was no point going to the World Court with the shit question. There's no point, because it would be terrible. It would put us in an even more precarious place than the one we're already in, and it's hella precarious already. But in March of this year, the youth group, the Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change, the government of Vanuatu, all of its supporters around the world, we rallied sufficient support to do what sort of has never happened in world history, at least since the founding of the United Nations, post-World War II. We passed a resolution by consensus. In terms of a resolution of the General Assembly of the United Nations requesting an advisory opinion. It has never been done by consensus. I believe that we succeeded in this primarily because we did it the Pacific way. Like we did, it was hard as hell. And it took time. It took time and it took intimacy. It took relationality as opposed to transactionality. It took all of that time. And what did we do? We focused on our brothers and sisters in the Pacific first. Vanuatu was very clear. If we have any chance, if we have a chance in hell at getting this over the line, we're going to have to take a long look around and rally the support first and foremost among the climate vulnerable. So we talked to fellow Pacific Island countries and we did what was needed to really build support. And to build support, what does that really mean? Breaking bread, having lunches, having conversations, meeting one-on-one, explaining what a climate justice question really would look like, what a question that's capable of catalyzing the kind of social change we need in the world. What would that question look like? So this is just the ICJ slide, we'll ignore this. This is the UNGA resolution that we secured. I don't even know if y'all can read that. Right? No, right? I'm assuming. I can hardly read it. And I have glasses, but the point is, it's very small, the font. I should have changed that. Sorry, Robert. But we will just go to the most important one, page 2. There. That's the question. Do you see the indentation having particular regard? But don't worry, I zoomed that one. I zoomed that one because it's terribly important. This is so lame, I'm gonna read it. Unless you all say out loud, you can read this. Can you read this, everybody? Good, okay, I will not read it. But, is there a fancy light on this? Oh, yes, okay, so this thing right here, this we call a chapeau. This is an umbrella paragraph. I'll give you a sec to read it. Have you all had a chance? Good? Okay. I can hardly, I'm sweating now, yeah. I sweat very easily. I can hardly stress the importance of this umbrella paragraph. Why? Because Vanuatu, flanked now by everyone, by the rest of the world, is asking the court a very important question, arguably an epic question. That's what I call it. I say epic because we were asking the court to bring to bear virtually the entirety of international law to the conduct in question, the target conduct, right? Which is the anthropogenic emission of greenhouse gases, the conduct that is causing what we call climate change. Why is this so radical? Because we got in all of this law. That's a hell of a lot of law. Let me break it down. If this was a shit question, it would have just been this. We would only highlighted this. Under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, what are the obligations say? That would be a terrible question. Why? Because it's the world we're already living in. So many people are making a very sort of like narrow legal argument, and they're all too happy to exploit the prevailing legal ambiguity surrounding the current international climate change regime. You should know that. You should know that people who are solicitous of preserving the status quo and their dubious place in it hate that part. I mean, they would love that kind of question. Under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, what are obligations? What are the consequences? Why? Because it's a narrow body of law. And we're already living it. We understand because every single year climate change gets worse, and every single year we have COPs, and every single year, we just have a lot of this sort of word soup. We just keep going around this wretched merry-go-round, and we're not getting to it. We're not getting to climate justice. We need much more radical. I think Naomi Klein said recently there are no non-radical solutions left. To the extent that you can do that in an ICJ advisory opinion, we did try to arguably be a little radical. But yes, that would have been a terrible question. But no, we're saying no, court. We are asking you to do something very, very different. We are asking you to adjudge the legality of the target conduct under a very wide corpus of international law, to include treaty-based international law, such as, right? Where are we? Oh, right here. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So treaty-based international law, of course, there's the UN Charter too, but also general international law, also known as customary international law. So yes, for example, we include the duty of due diligence, the rights recognized in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the principle of prevention of significant harm to the environment, and the duty to protect and preserve the marine environment, which comes from UNCLOS, But also, we're saying what these countries are doing, what so many of these big emitters are doing, are already violations of international law that already exists and is already binding. You see the difference? And we're asking the court to adjudge it under all of that. And everything here is important. We have fought tooth and nail for every word of this text, and it all matters. I don't know, to give you one tiny example, the duty of due diligence. It's so important that it's in there because as a norm of international law, it goes back so far in time. We need this norm in here, the rule. We need this there because this gets us so much farther back in time than some other international law, right? We know we need this. Why? Because the conduct in question has been happening for a long time. And okay, now this might be too nerdy, so I'll stop there. But I'll just say, we need all of this. And we fought hard as hell for this. Vanuatu did. And then the first question, what are the obligations of states under international law? Great question. What are the obligations? And we're trying to get the court to answer that. But that's not really what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the second question, because arguably more important, at least it's the climate justice component of the question. What are the legal consequences under these obligations for states? Okay, now I'm reading, but God, this is the operative part, so we want to read this. What are the legal consequences under these obligations for states where they, by their acts and omissions, have caused significant harm to the climate system and other parts of the environment with respect to two classes, right? States, including in particular small island developing states, which due to their geographical circumstances and level of development are injured or specially affected by or are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. And peoples and individuals of the present and future generations affected by the adverse effects of climate change. This is, in my humble opinion, kind of an awesome question because, well, thank you. Now you can clap for this. You can clap for this. Because it's really, thank you. It's really, not because, and of any other reason other than, where is this red line? There, legal consequences. We are actually asking a question that matters. What are we trying to do here? As lawyers in the room, you might know, we are invoking, plain as day, the secondary rules of state responsibility. We are trying to get to that body of law. Why? Because it's where the home for reparations is. Loss and damage, what we know as loss and damage, what we know as climate reparations, all of it lives here. Well, that's why we use other terms of art, such as injured or especially affected by. These are terms of art. For non-lawyers, they're very particular terms to which we attach specific legal meaning, And that means all the climate vulnerable countries on Earth, like Vanuatu and others, can point and say, here is the injury. We are an injured party. We are owed reparations. We can fight for loss and damage. This is a cavernous question, really. It is, and it's powerful, and no one has ever asked the court to weigh in on it. But now we have a chance. And by the way, the first round of briefs is due in January. So all UN member states are being invited, and a certain number of pre-approved international organizations are being invited to participate in what is arguably the most important climate justice case going on in the world right now. And that is why, because it will affect everybody everywhere. It will, and there's no hiding. That's what we want. We want a question where there's no more hiding. There's no more dark corners left. You know, this is what climate justice from a legal perspective, this is arguably the kind of the closest we can get, because we're actually even specifying the kind of parties we have in mind. We're not blind or ignorant. We're not feigning ignorance here. We are saying no. Small island developing states are injured parties. They are injured states. And why is the state responsibility the question, legal consequences? Why does all this matter? Again, state responsibility. We get restitution, compensation, non-repetition, apologies, whatever way you want to call this. This is a body of law that matters, and it's never been brought to bear on the climate crisis, and it will be now. So yes, this is the other thing I do this is the other thing I do. Wait, what am I? How am I on time? I'm still okay, right, Robert? 5 minutes? Okay. Oh, wow. Ah, shit. Okay. Do I still have to? Okay. No, real talk. Do I have like at least 12 minutes left or? Okay. Okay, wait. I lie. I'm gonna go back. But really quick. No, because I forgot something that's super important, actually. Okay, when I talked about my work as a writer, and also we can apply the same lessons to my work as a lawyer, words matter. But more important, the way other people are using words matter. There's a lot of legal mischief going on all the time. For example, have caused. This phraseology is wildly important. Why? Because we were saying, because certain parties wanted to have that language deleted. Of course, I won't go into the details, but you should at least suffice it to say, certain countries prefer other language, such as are causing, such as have caused and are likely to continue to cause, or are likely to cause. Why does all of this matter? It's almost like what I'm trying to invite you to do is like join me in this little enterprise that I call being hyper vigilant about language. You know, we have to be hyper vigilant because have caused, that's also backward looking. We are trying to account for historical omissions. We are not saying we're satisfied to pretend there is no sort of block of countries that have historically contributed to climate change or that have caused climate change. It's a fact, you know? To say, for example, I'll just give you one example. I'll give you two. Have and continue to cause, right? Have caused and continue to cause. You're putting another layer. Then you have to satisfy two criteria. You have to have caused it, and God, see, Linda Krieger's in the audience, everybody. She was my professor for statutory interpretation, a class where I learned how to do this very well, you know? But basically, two elements. You have to have caused and you have to continue to cause. That's a much harder bar. And of course, what if a developed country, which is responsible for so many historical emissions, then finally ceases? So they have caused, but they're not continuing to cause, so they're out. Their conduct is not captured. You know, then likely to cause. Oh my God, don't get me started with likely to cause. Likely to cause, we already need to convince the court that we're not drawing them into a scientific trial. You know, likelihood, causality, then that becomes so much more the textual focus, and it's not. We have a clear when. We have clear language. This is important, but I'll move on. Okay, that was basically the last idea for that slide. Let's move on. Okay. What I just did was zooming in. Now, quickly, I want to zoom out. Because you have to do both. You have to do both. If you care about effectuating social change, and you are a social change lawyer, you just have to do both. You know? You do. And so this is a slide of a zoamti, my favorite zoamti, or medicine woman, as you might call them. She's awesome. She's Auntie Frances. And she is holding medicine that's available only in one place, the sacred area called the Texan or Retidian. It's the same area where the US government by next week will start its first exercises in live fire training range. The US government, part of the major military buildup of Guam, the centerpiece of which is this brand new 5-range firing range complex, the largest of which is a 59-acre machine gun range over this sacred area that will entail the destruction of multiple endemic species, including our Mariana eight-spot butterfly, which is the butterfly that is the namesake of the book, and that I write about, but I will quickly go now. I'm really aware of the time. I'm gonna quickly go. We're still cool, right? Okay, I'm gonna read this. Okay, I'll just read this one little thing. It's an excerpt from the book. Just this month, a $122 million contract was awarded to Black Construction. Sorry. To build a 59-acre multi-purpose machine gun range. The company has already begun clearing 89 acres of primary limestone forest and 110 acres of secondary forests. It is bitterly ironic that so many of these machines bear the name Caterpillar, when the very thing they are destroying is that precious creature's preciously singular habitat. To be sure, these forests house the host plants for the endemic Mariana eight-spot butterfly. They also serve as essential habitat for several endangered species, including a fruit bat, a flightless rail, and 3 species of tree snails, not to mention a swiftlet, a starling, and a slender-toed gecko. If only superpowers were concerned with the stuff of lowercase earth, like forests and fresh water. If only they were curious about the lives of small creatures. If only they were moved by beauty. If only. But what is happening here is proof that they are not so moved. Perhaps none of this should come as a surprise. Perhaps a country that routinely prefers power over strength and living over letting live is no country for eight-spot butterflies. While this latest wave of militarization should elicit our every outrage, indignation is not enough to build a bridge to anywhere. It's useful, yes, but we need to get a lot more serious about articulating alternatives if we hope to withstand the forces of predatory global capitalism and ultimately replace its ethos of extraction with one of our own. In the case of my own people, an ethos of reciprocity. Nowhere is that ethos more alive than in those very same forests. For it is there that our Zuamti, or healers, are keeping our culture alive, in particular our traditional healing practices. It is there on the forest floor and in the crevices of the limestone rock that many of the plants needed to make our medicine grow. It is there that our medicine women gather the plants their mothers and their mothers' mothers gathered before them. These plants, combined with others harvested from elsewhere on the island, treat everything from anxiety to arthritis. As someone who suffers from occasional bouts of bronchitis, I can attest to the fact that the medicine Auntie Frances makes to treat respiratory problems has proven more effective in my case than any medicine of the modern world. Yet, Auntie Frances, like so many other Zuamti I know, takes no credit for the cure. As she tells it, to do so would be hubris, as so many others are involved in the healing process. The plants themselves, with whom she converses in a secret language, her mother, who taught her how to identify which plants have which properties, and also how and when to pick them, and the ancestors who give her permission to enter the jungle, and who, on occasion, favor her, allowing her to find everything she needs and more. More than this, she tells me that I too am part of that process, that people like me who seek out her services give her life meaning, that she wouldn't know what to do with herself if she wasn't making medicine, that the life of a healer was always hers to have because she was born breech under the light of a new moon and thus had the hands for healing. But such things are inevitably lost in translation, and no military on earth is sensitive enough to perceive something as soft as the whisper of another worldview. I swear I have one last slide. Yes, so I would like to end with some overall thoughts about what I call an Indigenous pursuit of climate justice. I think that pursuit involves a set of values, principles, and practices which include, at a minimum, the following. 1, wait, let me cough. Sorry, too much talking. 1, fostering and maintaining a vigilance about language, our own and others, and more specifically, fighting against its perversion and corruption, especially by those seeking to weaponize it in order to defend the status quo and their dubious place in it. 2, realizing that there are 2 kinds of information: information that merely informs and information that informs and uplifts, while also seeing that for Indigenous peoples in particular, our stories are medicine and can be a deep well to draw from in dark times. 3, we are living in such times now, so it is necessary to find some way to accommodate 2 truths at once. On the one hand, that a relational as opposed to transactional worldview and approach to social, racial, environmental, and climate justice takes time. And on the other, that we are also running out of time. That, as another writer, Sandra Cisneros, recently said, the world we live in is a house on fire, and the people we love are burning. 4, putting to a decisive end the alienation of human beings from our other than human relatives, situating ourselves as part of the rest of creation, forsaking dominion for communion. 5, a profound poetic understanding of local environments, providing us with the depth of understanding of space that flat terms like environment and nature are unable to offer. Indigenous peoples have already made profound interventions in the world of environmental law, for example, and human rights, particularly influencing the development of the human right to a healthy environment. If you trace the genealogy of this right, it leads us to arguments that Indigenous people first made that the right to culture includes a right to a healthy environment. Because of the way that our cultural practices and beliefs intersect with the environment, the emergence of this particular right as a universal right to a healthy environment that applies to all peoples is a clear legacy of Indigenous influence on human rights development. 6, I'm almost done. Cultivating a spiritual practice of radical listening, which is to say, listening to the voices of the most vulnerable among us, like the Mariana 8-spot butterfly or the grasshoppers and the snails that I write about in Zuku Means Yoke. If you recall, my first experiments with empathy were not with humans. They were with mollusks and the smallest of insects. And to end, I will read a poem about this flower, because why not? This poem is called Gausali. Gausali is dedicated to Judy Wampat, who tried to change the official flower of Guam from the invasive bougainvillea to the native Gausali, and who was bitterly mocked for it. So much hope for the future rests in a return to the right flower, to Gausali, torchwood of the sea, whose square white flowers cling to no one but the rugged limestone cliffs at the island's edge, whose wood warms us, whose wood will light our way again. I wanted to end there because it operationalized my last little conviction that I wanted to share with you, and that is, people are always so fond of saying the devil is in the details, but if that's true, then so too is God. And I wanted to share that because this poem matters so much to me because of the tense change at the very end of the poem. I say I have doubts. I'm struggling to hold on to my hope. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, right? I'm on the ground and I'm moving in community with others, trying to bring about climate justice and other ends, but I'm unsure. And so the rest of the poem proceeds from the present, right? Whose wood warms us. And I'm not sure, but I'm hopeful. So I say, will light our way again. It's a tense change and it's the smallest of things. But as Arundhati Roy again would say, the smallest of things absolutely, irrefutably connects to the very biggest of things. Thank you so much.